Welcome to Byte Club, Goldsby. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Byte Club is MTM's new kind of semi-regular video podcast series where we talk to some of the best minds in the software engineering industry to understand a bit more about, what's keeping them up at night, what are they thinking about, how have they felt about some of the big changes that have been taking place over the certainly last couple of years, but even beyond that. I'm your host, Michael Underhill. I head up the developer consultancy work that we do here at MTM. We've worked in this area for the last 5 years or so, helping some of the biggest providers of developer tooling understand a bit more about software engineers, what makes them tick, and what they need to do in order to build the best software. It'd be great to hear a bit more about yourself.
I'm Jel. I've been in technology in the industry for the last 30 years. I guess I got into computers and programming and stuff through my dad. He bought me a computer when I was 8. And I've been interested in that kind of industry ever since. I did comp sci at university, and then I was a developer for, I guess, 15 years. Time flows very quickly, maybe a bit longer, 20 years. And then I moved more into kind of the management side, the leadership side. And that's where I am currently. I guess from kind of companies I've worked for, I've never worked in the same industry twice, so I really enjoy the challenge of trying different domains and learning different things. So kind of push myself to try something different each time. So I don't know, health, security, oil and gas, telecommunications, accounting, travel, advertising. I feel like I've tried various sections of industry. Because of 30 years of working in the industry, I've seen a lot of different trends, a lot of different ways of working. I've worked with a lot of different people, and I've seen from kind of small startups, 3 people, to multinational thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. So kind of got a lot of experience there.
When your dad first gave you that computer, what was it that excited you about what you could do with it and how it all worked?
I think it was just this massive black box. And at the time, there wasn't the internet, as we know it now. So I had one little book on how to learn BASIC and this computer and a little flashing cursor. And that was it. And it was like, how do I make this thing do stuff? So I used to spend hours copying out code, not really knowing what it did. And then at the end of it, after 2 hours of copying code, the computer might go beep, 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 or flash a red triangle on the screen. And it'd be like, but what was it about the code that made it do that? It was just, a challenge.
And 20 years later, is that still the same thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, obviously computers have advanced a little bit since then. Just a bit. Technology does not stand still even for a second. So there is always something to learn. So one of my previous jobs, I got really into kind of big data and databases and stuff. So that was a real learning experience for me. And then I got very into kind of the platform side and DevOps and all that. So there's always a new thing to learn, and AI, which I'm quite sure we will talk about later. It's probably the big one at the moment.
Yeah. You mentioned a second ago that, you've seen some big changes over the course of the last 20 years. And, what are some of the ones that have kind of stuck out?
So I think, firstly, when I started, and I used to tell people I was a programmer, they were like, ooh, why would you do that? It was, you're stuck in the back room in the dark. No one really knows what you do. It's kind of a mystical art. Whereas now, everyone knows what a developer is. Everyone has some idea about software development. It's just mainstream. That's a big thing. Another thing I think is Agile. Mm-hmm. So one of my earlier jobs I did, it was extreme programming. And again, at the time, no one really knew what extreme programming was, Agile was, and that has just become more mainstream. I'm not saying everyone does Agile, but even in really large enterprise companies, you'd probably have one team that works in an Agile. Obviously, everyone has a different idea of exactly what Agile means, but it's a lot more kind of that. Delivering fast, trying out a thing, getting customer feedback, actually talking to the customer, and then iterating on the thing that you've put out there.
What is it about Agile and other kind of big changes that kind of makes them stick?
The time and effort it takes to write a thing, sorry, that's very non-specific, but to create a thing is vast, is a lot of money, and people want to know. I mean, previously, I would say you would work for 6 months, a year on a thing, and then you'd push it out there. And then maybe it wasn't even the thing that was wanted, or it was obsolete by the time it had made it out there. Now you spend a week trying to write a thing, put it out there, get customer feedback. Turns out it's nothing the customer wants. So then you rebase and try a different direction.
Does that sort of idea of kind of speed, fluidity, does that also addressing customer needs. Does that also apply to some other things like, the move from on-prem to cloud or the rise of DevOps you mentioned there?
Yeah.
Is that a sort of, or are there sort of different trends that are kind of pushing the industry in that sort of direction?
Yeah, definitely. From a tech startup point of view, I would say all tech startups use cloud without a doubt, because you can, you've suddenly got all of your infrastructure there within a day, let's say, whereas previously you had to go out and buy all your infrastructure to get a professional in to work out what you needed to install, etc. So I think that's definitely a massive trend that's not going away. On the downside, I guess, for that is for the majority of companies, developer salary plus cloud is the two really big expenses. And in some case, cloud is more expensive than developer salary.
The flip side of this speed is then this need for this kind of new discipline of DevOps to kind of professionalize things, or professionalize is maybe the wrong word, but that side of it, is that how you see it, or where does sort of DevOps fit into this picture?
This is maybe one of the big trends that kind of taken a step back. Previously, if you were a developer, you wrote code, and that was your entire job. That was what you did. You wrote code in a basement, wearing socks and sandals.
Yeah.
But now, if you are a software developer, you also need to be able to understand the product and talk to the clients. You need to be able to do the DevOps. You need to be able to do the testing. You need to be able to do the deploy. You need to be able to do the fixing on production. You need to be able to spin up your own architecture cloud. You need to be able to do the social skills. You need to be able to get people on board. You need to be able to run meetings. You need to be able to create alignment on direction, etc. Particularly if you want to get to senior staff developer, you have to have those external skills, not just development. So I think that's something that has really changed.
To touch on something there about the kind of the need for this sort of, it's no longer just that you need to know how to write BASIC. No one needs to know how to write BASIC anymore, but it's no longer that you just need to know how to write code. It's all these external skills as well. And I think one of the things that we've heard is the sort of need for kind of domain expertise as well. And that can be a sort of really kind of crucial part of understanding why you're writing what you're writing. And you mentioned that you've kind of sort of chopped and changed from between kind of a bunch of different industries, from security, healthcare, etc. Has that been a help? Has that been a hindrance? How has that sort of played out for you?
It's a really good question, because I know a lot of people who specialize. I know a lot of people who just work in security and they go from one job to another in development in security. I don't think I've ever noticed it being a hindrance for me personally, because I really enjoy the challenge of learning the new domain. And fundamentally, tech is tech regardless of domain. You're writing the code, you're doing the DevOps, you're doing the architecture. The challenges of tech are the same across the board.
What are some of those big challenges? What is it that kind of keeps you in the office till 11 o'clock and whatever it might be?
I mean, keeps you in the office till 11 o'clock. It's solving the particular problem you have now, and you're just like, come on, got to get this done. But for me personally, I really like kind of the wider the architecture. I find really interesting. You go from a small startup, you can have a monolith, you can just write. It's more just write code and get it out and get the thing doing the thing. But then as you grow, you have to really think about latency and uptime and all these other, and security and all of these other aspects. And then you have to think a lot more about the architecture and the domain and how you break things up. And I find that a really interesting journey. That's one of my favorite journeys to do.
At the very start, you alluded to the rise of AI and the fact that everyone uses Copilot, everyone talks to ChatGPT instead of their rubber duck. How do you see that playing into this idea of it's not just about writing code anymore? Where does AI sit into that?
So I tend to look at AI on two axes. There's AI to help developers specifically, I guess, work faster, work more efficiently, help developers. And then there's AI that you can help your customers with. Yeah. So maybe separating them. From a AI that helps developers. Okay, first up, personally, and probably someone's going to play this back in 20 years' time and be, she got it so wrong. But I can't see it putting developers out of a job, because yes, AI can write code, but it doesn't always get it right. And unless you know how to write code and you know what good code looks like, how can you then say yes or no to what the AI is suggesting to you, right? And I think that's a real danger point, particularly with junior developers, that they might just be, oh, the AI said it's right, click, 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 yes, 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 and then come up with something that is fundamentally wrong or is too slow or doesn't make sense, is really hard for other people to read. And writing code is very much about not just making it do the thing you want to do it, but making it do it effectively, efficiently, and in a way that's testable and readable to people, a year down the line looking at the code. They have to be able to understand it.
How have you approached AI within the teams that you've been managing? Has it been a carte blanche or?
So in the companies that I've worked at most recently, we've been using Copilot, and it's not had any noticeable negative effects. But then we did do code reviews, and I think that's really important to understand, what is the code, how's it being written, is it correct, and to do those code reviews.
So it's use them, but we've got some guardrails in place to make sure that that the code is still readable in a year's time and understandable and all that sort of stuff. How about kind of using AI from a customer perspective?
I'm part of a leadership group, CTOs, directors of various companies. And the last time we met, we had a discussion specifically on AI. And I think what was really interesting, I went into that discussion being like, right, I'm going to find out how everyone else is using it. I'm going to find out, what is AI? And we kind of had the discussion, what is AI? Obviously, everyone gave their own views. But what came out of it was the majority of people think there's some great stuff they can do with AI. They want to do great stuff with AI, but they haven't yet figured out where the value is. So they don't know what is going to deliver the value to the customer and make it worthwhile spending the time to invest in AI for the majority of people. That was one thing. And the second thing is the worry about the legality. Like, let's say you've got a chatbot and you're in an industry that's regulated, and the chatbot tells your customer some misinformation. Is that the end of your company? Where does that go to? I think that's a real concern for the majority of people.
One of the interesting things that I think that we've seen when we've been talking to developers is this sense of, for the kind of the co-pilots, the coding assistants specifically, is the sense of, well, hang on a second, they've been trained on open source data. And that's data that's been written by the community for the community, and you're now charging us $20 a month to benefit from that. Is that something that's sort of top of mind for you as well?
$20 a month, there are bigger costs in technology.
Like developer salaries. If you're getting an extra 50% of a developer, then...
I think if it can save people time and people use it wisely, I think it's a good investment. Otherwise people are just going to be looking on Stack Overflow for the answer, right?
Where do you see this going? If we were having this conversation in the spring of 2025, do you think anything will have changed? Will GPT-5 or Gemini Max or whatever it ends up being called, do you think that has changed the nature of the way that developers think about this, or have we sort of reached stasis?
From a developer point of view, I think it will continue to get better and more intelligent and give better suggestions. So I think on that, to me, that seems like an upside. I think from a security point of view, AI could be really beneficial to developers to point out if there are problems with the code or with the libraries, etc. From an AI point of view in the world, I do have quite serious concerns from kind of the bias and the training data and all of that sort of stuff. And I can't really imagine what the world is going to look like in 5-10 years, but I'm pretty sure it's going to change drastically.
Well, one of the things that I think we've been hearing about is just the importance of context for so much of the suggestions and kind of and what sort of an AI coding assistant can do. And you get this sense that there's kind of low context tools. You'd maybe put the chatbots in that, maybe with a bit of sort of sensible prompt engineering, you can kind of make them a bit more contextually aware. Then you've got maybe the sort of the medium context tools that have access to your code base, understand a bit more about kind of what's going on. But really what, you need in order to be a sort of an effective, a sort of a truly effective or kind of autonomous tool is this kind of real high context. It needs to understand the water cooler chat that you had with your boss. It needs to read the last 5 years of Slack messages that you've sent in your team. It needs to have access to every single Jira ticket. Could you see a sort of a high context AI companion coming along that does have access to all of that?
Where we are currently, the most value I see for AI is kind of internal chatbots for, like, let's say, customer service teams or just people in general in a company. One of the big problems I always have joining any company is they've got like a wiki, and then they've maybe got another wiki, and then they've got Jira tickets, and then they've got, like, there's so much data in the company documents and the handbook, and how do you actually find anything? And there's and Slack, obviously, millions of Slack messages, and there's no unified bring everything together into one place. For me, that's where Chat GCP can really work, if it can get all of those data sources, and then you can go, oh, what's the answer to this question? And tell you that. I think that's, to me, the biggest advantage I can see at the moment. Could I imagine my stand-up being run by Chat GPT? I think it would just make it very dehumanized. Like, stand up, yes, you're agreeing what you're going to do, you're looking at the workload, you're making sure you've got your right priorities, but it's also a chance to interact with your team and kind of have that human connection. If it was very controlled by AI, I don't know how I'd feel about that.
Very fair.
Does that make me old school?
No, not the slightest. What sets AI apart from the metaverse, from blockchain, from everything that we've had over the, it feels like, every year there is the latest hot new thing. What sets that apart? What sets AI apart?
For me, the fact that they've already got viable working solutions that are useful, that I use personally on a day-to-day basis. I never used blockchain on a day-to-day. And you can probably check out the memes and see like memes on blockchain versus memes on AI, and which one's stronger? Probably the blockchain.
Gotcha. Coming back to this idea of sort of shifts in technology, and obviously kind of the rise of AI and coding assistance has been probably one of the biggest ones in the software development world over the last 18 months or so. What is it, again, that kind of makes it stick? I think earlier we talked about improving time and speed and consistency and things. Is that the same thing that applies to AI?
I think it's just that data overload. I've noticed a lot of people really struggle with finding things with too much information, and kind of to the extent that it causes health issues, that they get burnt out from trying to onboard into a new company or find the right information. I think AI has a real advantage there of simplifying things. Whether it simplifies them in the right way or whether it misleads people, still to be decided.
At the start, you talked about, going back to the start of your career and people not, why would you want to be a programmer sitting in the basement? And it's now kind of much more mainstreamed. And of course, now everyone knows what a software engineer is. The Silicon Valley startups are the coolest places to work on the planet. But it has, that sort of mainstreaming hasn't been reflected in who, what the typical software engineer looks like.
Yes.
And there are still kind of big issues with diversity in tech and so on. How do you think about the main problems with diversity in tech?
From my point of view, I guess diversity to me, although there are many different types of diversity, the one that I'm kind of most aware of and most wanting to push is obviously the gender diversity. Kind of a personal interest, obviously. Definitely at the start of my career and even more recently, I have often been the only female developer or maybe the only female in the entire company. Like, that has definitely been a thing that I am used to. I would love to see that change, and I have seen it change in some places.
What's the connection between the places where you have seen that change? Yeah. Is it, in initiatives from leadership?
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about gender diversity. I think from gender diversity point of view, the times that I've really seen improvement is kind of a chicken and egg situation. The more women you have working, the more women who come to interview can be interviewed by women or can see women or can talk to women at the company. It becomes a snowball effect, and you're more likely to be able to hire women. There is absolutely no doubt about that. You need to have leadership have bought into the idea of diversity. You need to have the right culture to promote that diversity. You need to have, in my view, the important things is kind of a collaborative culture, a learning culture, psychological safety, just nice, normal human beings that you want to work with. Tend to create a culture where you're more likely to get women coming in. Yes. So it's very chicken and egg. as I went into leadership roles, I think that has really helped bring more women in. That sounds very egotistical, but I think seeing a female leader as a woman, then you're more likely to think, actually, this is probably going to be a place that I want to work. It's a safe place, if you will. And I definitely, when I interview for places, I think the most important thing for me is the feel. How do I feel talking to these people? Do I feel safe? Do I want to work with them? Do I think this is a culture I can work in?
That feels like something that's kind of quite hard to change or quite hard to improve.
Yes.
And, is that a sort of company question? Is it an industry question? I suppose there's kind of company leadership, then there's also industry leadership. How do you see it being tackled?
Not everyone cares about diversity. Not everyone has yet realized the importance of diversity. So there's going to be some companies where it's like, we don't care, we just want developers. Done. They don't care who the developers are. So the subsection of people who do care, it has to be leadership led, and they have to really show that they mean it, right? There's nothing worse than, this massive diversity statement, this whole thing on your website. We equal opportunities, we welcome everyone, come in, and then they have a picture of everyone working there and it's white male, late 20s. Junipox of what you're saying with what is actually the truth. So you have to really show it. I don't know if people are aware, but there's a real grapevine. There are companies I would never work for. I have no idea that much about the company, but I have been told this is not a safe place for a woman to work. Therefore, I wouldn't work there. So avoiding getting onto those lists, if you have previously had issues at the company, then you're going to have to do some major turnaround marketing, really make an effort. But for the majority of companies, sorry, that's a slight tangent. For the majority of normal companies, I think it's hiring the right people to promote a culture of safety so that people who are not white male mid-20s actually want to go and work there.
Something that I assume you've taken to heart as and when you're hiring.
Absolutely.
Members, yeah.
But I do pick companies very carefully. I don't want to go into that horrible uphill struggle. I've never gone into a company where I know that it's going to be a nightmare, because I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Why make my life harder than it is? Yeah. One thing that I've noticed people are doing is the hiring pipeline. So they're asking the agency or whoever they're working with to put in, let's say, 50% diverse candidates into the hiring pipeline, which I think is a really great idea. It doesn't mean that you're hiring 50%. Obviously, you've still got to go through the interview process and they've got to pass. Yeah. But I think by skewing, well, not even skewing, 50-50, the hiring pipeline, it gives you more opportunity of actually successfully hiring a diverse candidate. So I think that's a really great practice. From a kind of gender point of view, I think you're much more likely to be able to hire a more junior developer who's female. There is a severe lack of any kind of senior staff female developers, which is a real shame. But I hope in 10 years' time there's going to be a lot more, because all those juniors coming in, I hope they're going to really enjoy the industry. I personally think, I've been in it for 30 years. I think it's a great place to work. I've made some amazing friends. So hopefully those juniors will become seniors. Yeah.
And also a call out to all fathers to buy their daughters computers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Fathers unite.
Is there anything else that's kind of top of mind for you about, I suppose, diversity, but also just more generally in the industry at the moment?
I love working in tech. I think you get to solve some of the most interesting problems. I think you get to continuously learn, continuously use your brain, have these amazing meetings, make these amazing friendships with various very intelligent, very interesting people. I think it's an amazing industry, and I hope more females get into it and enjoy it as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. We've got a couple of little gifts to say thank you. Obviously, the mug is one, and also our very own Byte Club teeth. Oh. So thank you so much for taking the time. It was really great to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, really nice to meet you.